Have you ever wondered what life would be like without government? Would it be a world of freedom and harmony, or one of chaos and fear? In the 17th century, an English philosopher named Thomas Hobbes tackled these very questions in his groundbreaking work, Leviathan. But before we dive into his ideas, let's first explore the man behind the book and the experiences that shaped his worldview. Thomas Hobbes was born in England in 1588, during a time of great political and social upheaval. His early life was marked by the turmoil of the English Civil War, a conflict between the supporters of King Charles I and those who sought to reform the monarchy. Hobbes received a classical education at Oxford University, where he studied the works of ancient philosophers like Aristotle and Plato. After graduating, he worked as a tutor for wealthy families, which gave him the opportunity to travel throughout Europe and engage with leading thinkers of his time. It was during this period that Hobbes began to develop his own philosophical ideas. He was particularly interested in the nature of human behavior and the role of government in society. Hobbes believed that, without the constraints of laws and authority, humans would inevitably descend into a state of chaos and violence. These ideas would later form the basis of his most famous work, Leviathan, which he wrote while in exile in France during the English Civil War. Published in 1651, the book quickly became one of the most influential works of political philosophy in history. To fully appreciate Hobbes' perspective, it's crucial to understand the historical context in which he lived. The English Civil War was a time of great political, social, and religious upheaval. The conflict pitted the supporters of King Charles I, who believed in the divine right of kings, against those who sought to limit the power of the monarchy and establish a more representative form of government. The war was characterized by brutal violence, with both sides committing atrocities against civilians and combatants alike. Hobbes witnessed this destruction firsthand, and it had a profound impact on his view of human nature and the role of government in society. At the heart of Hobbes' philosophy is his belief that humans are inherently self-interested creatures. In the absence of government and laws, he argued we would constantly be at war with one another, fighting for resources, power, and survival. Hobbes called this the state of nature, a condition in which life would be solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. To illustrate this point, let's consider a thought experiment. Imagine a group of people stranded on a deserted island with limited food, water, and shelter. Without any rules or authority to govern their behavior, Hobbes believed that they would quickly turn on each other, resorting to violence, deception, and betrayal to secure their own survival. In this state of nature, there would be no justice, no rights, and no security. The strong would dominate the weak, and the cunning would exploit the naive. It would be a world where might makes right, and where the only law is the law of the jungle. For Hobbes, this bleak vision of human nature was not just a theoretical abstraction, but a reality that he had witnessed firsthand during the chaos of the English Civil War. He saw how quickly the veneer of civilization could crumble, and how easily people could be driven to commit horrific acts of violence and cruelty. To escape this state of nature and establish a stable, peaceful society, Hobbes proposed a radical solution, the creation of an all-powerful sovereign or government, which he called the Leviathan. The Leviathan would be like a monstrous sea creature, towering over its subjects and commanding their obedience through fear and awe. Its power would be absolute and indivisible, with the authority to make and enforce laws, punish transgressors, and maintain order and security. But the Leviathan's power would not be based solely on fear and coercion. Hobbes argued that it would also provide important benefits to its subjects, such as protection from external threats, the resolution of disputes, and the provision of public goods like infrastructure and education. In essence, the Leviathan would act as a neutral arbiter, rising above the petty rivalries and conflicts of individuals to pursue the common good of society as a whole. It would be a force for stability, order, and prosperity, ensuring that people could live their lives in peace and security. Of course, the idea of an all-powerful government may seem frightening or even tyrannical to us today. But for Hobbes, living under the rule of the Leviathan was far preferable to the alternative of the state of nature, with its endless cycle of violence, chaos, and fear. But how would the Leviathan come into being, and what would be the basis of its legitimacy? For Hobbes, the answer lay in the idea of the social contract, a concept that would become one of the most influential ideas in the history of political philosophy. According to Hobbes, individuals in the state of nature would eventually recognize the futility and danger of their situation, and would agree to form a social contract with one another. Under this contract, they would voluntarily give up some of their natural rights and freedoms to the Leviathan, in exchange for the protection and security that it would provide. This might sound like a difficult trade-off, but Hobbes argued that it was a rational and necessary one. After all, what good were our natural rights and freedoms if we could not exercise them in safety and peace? By giving up a portion of our liberty to the Leviathan, we would gain the far greater benefits of living in a stable, prosperous society. Think of it like a contract between an employer and an employee. The employee agrees to give up some of their time and autonomy to work for the employer, in exchange for a salary, benefits, and job security. In the same way, citizens under the Leviathan would agree to obey its laws and authority, in exchange for the protection and order that it would provide. Of course, the social contract theory was not without its critics. Some argued that it was based on a false premise, and that individuals in the state of nature would not necessarily agree to form a social contract. Others worried that the Leviathan's power would be too great, and that it could easily devolve into tyranny and oppression. Despite its influence, Hobbes' theory of the Leviathan was not without its flaws and limitations. One of the main criticisms was that it was based on a very pessimistic view of human nature, and did not allow for the possibility of cooperation, altruism, or social harmony. Critics also pointed out that Hobbes' theory was based on the assumption of an absolute monarchy, which was the dominant form of government in his time. In today's world, however, we have developed more sophisticated systems of checks and balances, representative democracy, and the rule of law, which help to limit the power of government and protect individual rights. There are also questions about how the Leviathan's power could be effectively limited or controlled, and whether it would be possible to prevent it from devolving into tyranny or oppression. After all, history is full of examples of governments that have used their power to crush dissent, persecute minorities, and violate human rights. Despite these criticisms, there is no denying the profound impact that Hobbes' ideas have had on modern political philosophy. His concept of the social contract has influenced thinkers from John Locke to John Rawls, and has helped to shape our understanding of the relationship between individuals and their government. Hobbes' work also helped to establish the field of political science, which studies the nature of power, governance, and decision-making in human societies. Today, scholars and policymakers continue to grapple with the fundamental questions that Hobbes raised about the balance between individual liberty and collective security, the role of government in society, and the foundations of political legitimacy. As we have seen, Thomas Hobbes' Leviathan is a complex and provocative work that continues to resonate with us today. By exploring the darker aspects of human nature and the need for strong government, Hobbes challenged us to think deeply about the foundations of social order and the role of the state in our lives. While we may not agree with all of Hobbes' conclusions, his ideas remain a crucial part of the ongoing conversation about the nature of politics and society. As we navigate the challenges of our own time, from climate change to social inequality to the rise of authoritarianism, we can draw important lessons from Hobbes' insights into the human condition. Ultimately, the legacy of Thomas Hobbes is a reminder of the enduring importance of political philosophy, and of the need for each generation to grapple with the fundamental questions of power, justice, and the common good. By engaging with these ideas, we can become more informed and active citizens, and work towards building a society that balances the needs of the individual with the greater good of the community.